The bank was completely packed by mid-afternoon. Every eye in the lobby drifted toward the man in the wrinkled shirt and worn shoes. It is amazing how fast a room decides exactly who you are. He stepped to the counter and said one simple thing: "I just need to withdraw $50. The woman right behind him laughed. She did not even hide it. "50?" she repeated, her voice dripping with absolute contempt. Then the teller checked her screen and her entire face just froze. No one in that room was ready for what happened next. Stick around for this. The truth hiding in that account will completely shatter how you view true success. Her smug smile spread slowly. That is what arrogance does when it stops trying to hide. Scarlett looked him up and down, from his back to his worn shoes to his little girl. Her expression shifted right then, moving from mild amusement into something much sharper. It was the harsh look of someone deciding the man standing in front of her was entirely beneath her standards. "You waited this long," she scoffed. She pitched her voice loud enough for the whole room to hear, without quite yelling. For $50, Nathaniel did not even turn around. He kept his eyes aimed straight ahead, his hands resting flat on the counter. His posture never changed, only his fingers moved. He squeezed his little girl's hand gently. Scarlett let the heavy silence hang for a second, then pushed harder. "There is an ATM right outside, you know that, right? By the door. You did not need to stand in line for 20 minutes. A man further back in the line chuckled softly. Not loud, but just enough to let everyone know he agreed with her cruel judgment. A woman in a yellow coat. A blonde woman exchanged a knowing glance with the stranger next to her. That quiet, judgmental language of perfect strangers uniting over someone else's apparent failure. The teller behind the glass. Her name tag read Jessica, a 3-year veteran of this bank branch. She stared at her monitor with the intense focus of someone pretending they are deaf. Little Lily tugged gently on her father's hand. "Dad," she whispered so quietly he could barely hear it, "did we do something wrong?" That innocent question landed heavily in the silent room. Small honest words often fall quietly, carrying a weight far heavier than you expect. A few smirking faces suddenly dropped. One woman by the entrance guiltily looked away. The man who had chuckled suddenly found his phone incredibly interesting. Nathaniel knelt down slowly to Lily's level. He looked her right in the eyes, the way he did when her questions demanded total honesty. He just shook his head once, very slowly. "No, sweetheart," he told her gently. "We did nothing wrong." He stood back up, completely unbothered. Scarlett watched them like they were nothing but a minor inconvenience, simply tilting her head. But the way he spoke to his daughter, that unshakable, unhurried calm, threw her off. His total lack of shame left her briefly confused. "You and I both know how jarring it is when people refuse to feel small." "You know," she said, her tone dropping slightly, not quieter, just much more deliberate. It was the icy tone someone uses when they want to make their judgment painfully clear. "People like him really shouldn't waste our time in here." A quick, nasty judgment tossed out to nobody in particular. Spoken just loud enough to shame him, but cowardly enough to dodge any real blame. Those arrogant words drifted through the bank lobby, stinging whoever they hit. Jessica, the teller, typed at her keyboard with a tight jaw. Her face went totally blank, the way service workers do when facing cruel, snap judgments. She'd heard this snobbery before, and knew defending him would only make the situation worse. The father said nothing. He simply reached into his worn jacket, pulling out a plain, unbranded black bank card. A simple card offering 0 clues about his massive wealth, quietly placed on the counter. "Whenever you're ready," he told the teller calmly. Jessica slowly took his card. She swiped it through the machine smoothly, a mindless motion she'd done thousands of times without a single thought. She quickly typed his account number. Her eyes drifted up to the monitor. And then she froze. It wasn't some huge, dramatic pause. The judging crowd wouldn't notice, but you and I are about to see why. But standing right there at the counter, you could see a split second where Jessica just completely stopped breathing. Her hand floated over the keys, eyes locked on the impossible wealth glaring back at her. She blinked hard, staring at the screen again. She leaned in slightly to double-check, then pulled back. "Sir," she whispered, her voice suddenly filled with a deep newfound respect. Very careful, very precise. She suddenly realized the man everyone pitied commanded serious power, and chose her words carefully. "Are you sure you only want $50? The humble father met her gaze. "That is all I need," Jessica gave a nod. "Just checking." She typed another quick line, then froze again. Her eyes nervously darted left, straight toward the branch manager. A guy in a sharp gray suit sat inside a glass office in the corner, totally blind to the powerful man standing outside. Meanwhile, the judgmental woman behind them was entirely out of patience. She huffed through her nose. She had important meetings at 4:30 and a call at 5. And the Tuesday line at this bank was always way longer than her self-important schedule allowed. "Seriously," she whined to the whole room, "what is taking this broke guy so long?" A few customers shuffled their feet. Someone checked their phone. The blind, everyday impatience of a crowded lobby filled the room. Stick with me. Nobody knew their arrogant assumptions were about to completely shatter. His little girl leaned against him, watching the teller with pure, innocent eyes. That honest, unbothered stare only kids can pull off without looking completely rude. A stuffed rabbit dangled loosely from her arm. Its one good ear flopped lazily to the side. Jessica typed one final command, dropped her hands to her lap, and moved quietly. Still stunned by his secret wealth, she grabbed her desk phone and made a call. The hushed call took under 30 seconds. We're about to find out what she said, but the judging crowd heard absolutely nothing. Jessica listened, nodded just once, then carefully put the phone down. She looked back at Nathaniel. Her face showed a complete sudden shift. The forced, polite blankness vanished completely. Now it was pure, composed respect, not begging, not overly sweet, just genuine deference. Just the quiet focus of someone who finally realizes exactly who they are standing in front of. "Just a moment, sir, my manager is stepping over." Nathaniel gave a nod. "Take your time." Beside them, Scarlett let out a harsh, mocking little sound. "Of course a manager is needed," she smirked. "For $50? The man in the gray suit was David Holt, the branch manager for 11 years. A careful judge of character who had handled every kind of situation. He managed angry clients and strict federal auditors with the exact same calm focus. He left his office and walked smoothly across the bank floor. He walked with the steady pace of a man who knew better than to rush and cause a scene. Reaching the teller desk, he leaned toward the computer screen and read the account. His neutral expression did not change. He did not look like a man shocked by what he saw. It was the look of a man processing crucial facts, deciding very carefully exactly how he needed to handle this. He shared a quick look with Jessica. She gave him a tiny nod. Standing up straight, he finally turned his attention to the counter. The busy bank carried on. Keyboards kept clicking. A desk phone rang down at the far end of the room. Two people whispered by the doors, but the energy in the room had suddenly changed. You and I know that feeling. The silent shift when someone's true worth is finally revealed. The way a room's center of gravity shifts entirely, long before anyone even speaks a word. Scarlett was still watching closely. She sharply crossed her arms. "Is there a problem?" she demanded. David Holt completely ignored her. He kept his eyes fixed on Nathaniel. "Mr. Brooks," David said, his voice completely calm and unhurried. "Would you prefer this money taken from your main checking account or from one of your large investment portfolios?" The lobby did not quiet down instantly. It faded out slowly, like water pulling off a beach. The chatting by the door stopped. Then a man on his phone looked right over. A woman in a bright jacket froze mid-sentence and turned around. In just 4 seconds, the everyday noise of the busy bank vanished into thin air, leaving only the quiet, steady hum of the air vents running up in the ceiling. Scarlett slowly uncrossed her arms. A customer directly behind her whispered, "Wait." "What?" Nathaniel kept his face totally relaxed. He refused to glance around the space. He didn't seem aware, or simply didn't care at all, that every single person who had just judged him was now staring at his cheap, slightly wrinkled white shirt. "Primary is fine," he replied. Jessica's hands moved back to her keyboard. Her fingers visibly shook. "Right away, sir," David smoothly replied. "We will handle this for you immediately. Let's see how fast respect appears." He leaned in and whispered an order only the teller heard. She typed fast, the transaction processed, the receipt finally printed. Time ticked on, just like it always does, not caring who in the room was actually ready for the truth. But the room was still holding its breath. Take Scarlett Vaughn. She built an empire from a tiny Brooklyn desk into a $40 million fund in under 10 years. A woman who stood across boardroom tables from ruthless investors, negotiating without blinking once. She built her entire reputation on reading people, sizing up a room, and figuring out the power dynamic before anyone else even spoke. Yet now she stood frozen, her purse dangling from her wrist, her jaw clenched tight. Her eyes were locked onto the back of a man wearing a cheap, wrinkled shirt. And she wasn't laughing anymore. 2 rows back, a guy leaned over to the woman next to him, whispering. She just shook her head, the guy who was mocking him earlier, now staring at his shoes. Suddenly, nobody in that lobby cared about their cell phones. Investment accounts, plural. You and I know how quick we judge. That word hit the room like a heavy stone, ripples spreading everywhere. What Scarlett Vaughn didn't realize, what nobody in that bank understood. Because Nathaniel Brooks spent 6 hard years making absolutely sure that nobody would ever find out, was that this quiet man in scuffed shoes used to command boardrooms exactly like the one she ruled. 12 years ago. Nathaniel worked as a financial engineer at a solid quantitative trading firm down in Lower Manhattan. He wasn't exactly famous. You wouldn't find his face on magazine covers or headlining big flashy industry conferences. But he was incredibly brilliant. The kind of smart that made other financial analysts jealous and deeply resentful. The rare talent that turns boring, everyday routine work into something that quietly beats the market by margins way too big to just be dumb luck. He built complex models. He spotted hidden patterns in structured debt that everyone else threw away as useless background noise. And he had the patience to wait until those patterns proved true, never rushing a single move. He could explain his findings so clearly, making complicated financial data make sense without dumbing it down. For 3 solid years, the people with the power to act on his advice did exactly that. Then he walked away from the firm to build his own dream. The new startup he founded, a small tech company building quantitative pricing tools for mid-market investment fund managers. Let's look closer together. After 4 years of grinding, it started pulling in major outside attention. 2 early hires held small equity shares. His main partner was Derek, a guy Nathaniel had known since their graduate school days. Nathaniel trusted him deeply, the way a man trusts someone who bled beside him. Derek held 30%. When the betrayal finally happened, it wasn't loud, it was coldly technical. Derek secretly reached out to a strategic corporate buyer, hiding it from Nathaniel for 4 long months. He quietly set up a deal that would completely hand over total control of the business, carefully dodging the protective clauses that Nathaniel wrote into their very first legal partnership contract. Stick with me here. That kind of backstabbing takes serious patience, access, and the absolute cruelty of knowing exactly how to weaponize a good man's quiet, steady trust. Look past the surface. When Nathaniel realized what was happening, the damage wasn't fatal, but stopping the bleeding cost him his entire company. He settled, walked away keeping only his best intellectual property. His industry reputation barely survived. He took a payout based on old numbers, sacrificing the massive wealth his startup would have generated. A hidden fortune. 32 years old, standing at square one. He was also, right then, becoming a father. Honestly, Lily arrived 6 months before the corporate collapse. Those early days were loud, chaotic, and wonderfully joyful before the storm hit. The next 18 months told a much darker story. The following 2 years demanded a fierce resilience he never even realized he had in him. His ex-wife walked out during the massive restructuring. He didn't hold it against her, not with the usual bitter resentment that ruins a messy divorce. She bought into a glamorous path, only to wake up trapped in a struggling reality she never asked for. He fully understood that. He grasped it the way we all accept painful truths. It still hurts no matter how logically it makes sense. He raised Lily daily, aside from 3 quiet weekends monthly. Those childless days were brutally silent, not a peaceful calm, mind you, but the heavy silence that screams all the failures you desperately want to ignore. That first year, he coped by drowning himself in non-stop hustle. By year 2, he figured out that staying constantly busy wasn't the same thing as actually healing from the loss. Year 3 brought him down to earth, finding a true, steady balance. An authentic life of his own. A routine he built firmly around the few things that truly mattered. One that didn't need flashy social approval or anyone else's validation to keep spinning. Appearances deceive, he had rebuilt entirely in silence. The corporate payout quietly grew in safe index funds to build a solid foundation. He secretly ran a private portfolio for loyal colleagues who still believed in his sharp instincts. He also held direct equity shares in 3 hidden startups he had. Analyzed with the exact same intense focus he once gave to complex financial markets. His simple lifestyle, pure choice, never out of crushing poverty. Somewhere during that quiet climb back up, he made a choice. He decided flashing wealth wasn't the success he wanted for his daughter. Real riches don't ever scream for attention. He wore that faded, plain shirt strictly because it was clean and perfectly comfortable. He drove an older sedan because it ran flawlessly and the bank loan was dead. He brought Lily into the bank every Tuesday because she loved observing strangers and whispering curious questions about their lives. Plus, it gave them a beautiful ordinary ritual to share during those slow hours before dinner. That $50 just for ice cream. The heavy balance receipt slid from the machine. The teller, Jessica, folded it with reverence, handing it back using both hands. A sign of deep respect she hadn't shown any ordinary customer in her 3 years there. The judging stranger, Scarlett, froze. She was completely staring at his calm profile, the relaxed set of his jaw. Watching him casually tuck away that slip of paper, her judgmental face wore an expression that had radically shifted. Over these past 4 minutes, you and I watched her snap from shallow disgust to utter, speechless shock. She judged his worn clothes. What do you do? She pried. You and I know the tone. It slipped out harsher than intended. Usually, she carefully managed her arrogant tone and every single heavy word she spoke. Running a business for 12 years taught her how to mask deep judgment behind very casual-sounding questions. But this one felt raw and painfully arrogant. That happens when appearances trick you into making a blind assumption. Nathaniel gently held Lily's hand. He gave a tiny turn, showing he heard the insult. He stayed silent. Manager David Holt stood close by, wearing the calm face of a man who knew the real truth. Mr. Brooks is actually our top valued client, he stated. He spoke plainly, dropping the truth without any need to dress it up. Just flat reality, proving exactly why you never judge someone by their current situation. The bank lobby froze. The guy who chuckled quietly earlier stared hard at the floor in shame. The judging woman in the yellow blazer completely turned away. The customer who just whispered in shock went completely dead silent now. Lily stared up at her dad with pure, innocent 6-year-old eyes, feeling the heavy shame in the room without grasping the reason. Dad, she asked, why hide it from them? Nathaniel just looked down. His mouth twitched into something close to a gentle, forgiving smile for his little girl. Tell them what, Bug? That you have all the money. He crouched low, meeting her eyes slowly like he always did when sharing a deep lesson worth learning. All of us strangers waited eagerly to hear what he would say next. Because we never need to prove our worth, he said to absolutely anyone. Do you understand? Lily considered this with the serious weight that little kids often bring to lessons that truly matter in the end. She nodded once, saving that wisdom for when she might need it later on. Okay, she said. Can we get ice cream now? Almost, he answered and stood. Scarlett Vaughn usually bulldozed through life based on pure assumptions. She typically crushed every obstacle with fast, precise moves, assuming she always held better cards than whoever stood in her path. She was never good at pausing to look deeper. She never had to before, but her arrogance just hit a wall. She stood 3 feet away with her fancy designer bag on her wrist, standing frozen on marble, realizing any word she said now would just make her bad judgment look worse. You and I know that awful, physically uncomfortable feeling of instant regret. A harsh shame she recognized with shock, realizing the painful sting of judging a poor man wrong publicly. After a heavy pause, she tried anyway. I didn't mean to, she started. Nathaniel turned. He looked right at her for the first time since her arrogant question. He held no anger, he showed no gloating. He looked like a man used to people judging his rough appearance all the time. A man who knew exactly who he was, needing no flash to prove his worth to an ignorant crowd. You meant exactly what you said, he told her quietly. His words stayed calm, never cold, simply blunt. You and I know that kind of uncompromising, absolute honesty. Scarlett opened her mouth. Utter silence followed. You didn't laugh at my money, Nathaniel went on. His tone held zero anger. You laughed at who you assumed I was. He let the truth linger in the air, mirroring how her earlier insult had hung there. Except his words hit differently, because they were the absolute truth. And the whole lobby knew it. That's the part worth pondering, he said. Then he turned around, thanking the teller Jessica by name. He grabbed his daughter's stuffed rabbit from the teller station, where it rested while little Lily studied a fern over by the front window. Lily, let's go. The little girl took her toy, walking right beside him, her tiny fingers slipping into his hand entirely on instinct. They headed for the exit as Scarlett just stared blankly. All around her, banking resumed, keyboards clacking, phones buzzing, the customer queue creeping up. The daily grind of a busy financial branch carrying on like the confrontation never even took place. Let's pause here, because Scarlett was frozen right where she'd first smirked at him. Branch manager David Holt did not chase Nathaniel outside. He wasn't the type to parade a major high-net-worth client through a crowded public banking floor just for show. It always attracted unwanted stares which never did anybody any good. Still, he walked right up to the edge of the desk, and he watched closely through the glass panes as the father and daughter crossed the main entrance, disappearing quietly into the crisp October afternoon. He kept staring outside as Scarlett finally approached the teller. She dropped her debit card clumsily, a nervous flinch revealing she realized she had misjudged him. Jessica processed it silently. Then manager David stepped closer to the service window. He waited until the bank transaction was running before speaking up. And when he finally spoke, his hushed tone was meant entirely for Scarlett. I don't know if this matters to you, he murmured carefully, but Mr. Brooks actually holds a massive equity stake in Vaughn Capital Group. A silent venture capital backer since your Series B funding. Scarlett froze solid. Her startup's Series B round closed exactly 4 years ago. That massive investment let her business scale up, turning Vaughn Capital from a small boutique shop into a heavy hitter in the venture market. She memorized every single financial backer who had joined in. She shook all their hands, smiling through every closing dinner, personally calling every single angel investor who signed a check. She never once met a Nathaniel Brooks. He invested through a private holding company. David noted, easily reading the sheer panic on her face. Your capitalization table lists Brooks Linden Capital Partners. She instantly recognized that entity. Brooks Linden came in silently via an introduction just 2 weeks before funding formally locked. Her corporate lawyers vetted the structure. Her financial officer rubber-stamped it. The startup capital cleared the bank cleanly and on time. She treated it as standard business. You and I know her mistake. She never imagined her own snap judgments had a real face. She'd stood in that line, openly judging and laughing at him for needing $50. David gave a polite nod, quietly retreating back to his office. That heavy glass door clicked shut behind him, leaving silence. Scarlett just froze at the counter after her own banking was done. Her printed receipt just sat there on the cold counter. She couldn't even bring herself to pick it up. She kept picturing that father in his wrinkled shirt, ignoring the stares, crouching in a busy lobby just to look his little girl in the eye and assure her. He never even looked at the judgmental crowd, firmly promising his daughter they hadn't done a single thing wrong. Outside, the afternoon felt perfectly clear. That beautiful kind of crisp October city day. It sometimes gifts us to make up for the hard times, cool enough for jackets. Bright enough that golden light spilled in long, warm angles between the tall buildings. The sort of afternoon that makes everyone forget the rush and walk a bit slower. Nathaniel paused on the concrete sidewalk, smiling down at Lily. Okay, he murmured gently. He opened his wallet, revealing that $50 bill. Just a single crisp note, perfectly flat, fresh from the bank teller's cash drawer. What flavor? Lily pondered this question with absolute, adorable seriousness. Strawberry, she decided, and maybe some chocolate after. That is 2 flavors. You asked what flavor. Fair point, he smiled. They walked. Lily clutched her toy rabbit in one arm, safely gripping her dad's hand with the other. And her little sneakers tapped the pavement in that quick, joyful rhythm of a child whose Legs just weren't quite long enough for the big steps she tried to take. Unbothered by judgment, he simply matched her pace. It's how we match the rhythm of those we love, totally unaware we're doing it. He didn't even cast a glance back at that bank. He wasn't truly angry, or maybe he had just felt a brief flash of it. You and I know that frustration, when a snap judgment reminds you how cruelly the world treats people based on looks. How society just loves to categorize on sight. But holding on to bitterness just wasn't in his character. The sting arrived, he felt it. Then he let it go, saving his energy for things that actually mattered. He mastered that lesson years ago, in rooms far more important than some bank lobby. And that quiet wisdom had never left him. As they strolled, he pondered his daughter's innocent question. Why didn't you tell them? He weighed her words carefully, giving them the true respect they deserved. Her curious little questions were almost always deeper and much more profound than they initially seemed. She always managed to boil complex human behaviors down to their absolute simplest form, which naturally meant that giving her a truthful answer took real, intentional thought. Let's be honest here. He didn't defend his current situation because he owed them nothing. He wasn't there to fix their snap judgments or manage strangers' wrong assumptions or to prove his personal worth using a bank balance they couldn't even see. He only visited that lobby because his little girl loved watching people. And withdrawing $50 for an ice cream date just meant ignoring the smug stares while waiting in line. Let's be honest, that was always more than enough. He bought his daughter strawberry first. The quiet peace of a man who makes his choices and stands by them, regardless of appearances. Father and daughter shared a bench outside, soaking up the afternoon sun. Little Lily rambled on about some wild drama that happened at school involving a poor turtle and a huge mix-up over whose backpack it landed in. He absorbed every single word. 11 days after that bank visit, an email from Vaughn Capital hit his inbox on a Thursday morning. Direct from Scarlett Vaughn herself, not her assistant. The subject line simply read, "I owe you an apology." Nathaniel read it twice. No fancy corporate talk, just a raw, blunt admission of what went down. A crystal-clear confession of her regrets. She admitted toward the bottom that it had been eating at her for nearly 2 weeks, and she had decided he deserved this apology even if he totally ignored her. Deep in the message, she dropped news about Vaughn Capital planning a massive funding expansion. The kind of financial growth that skyrockets a business to the next tier. She made it clear she would totally understand if he passed on it. But she wanted him to hear the inside scoop first. Not for his cash. She had done some hard thinking about who truly belonged at her table and why. And her own conclusions stunned her. Nathaniel sat on that email for 2 days. He chewed on it, packing Lily's lunch, checking over his other financial assets. While sipping his Sunday coffee, watching the city crawl by at its own slow, easy weekend rhythm. He pictured the woman in the red dress who wrote him off, only to find out. Stick with me, in 4 minutes she realized she used the wrong yardstick. He weighed the heavy toll it takes on someone to type up an email like that. Not the business cost, but the ego. The price of staring in the mirror long enough to finally admit to an ugly truth you wanted to hide. Come Tuesday, he fired back. He passed on the investment. Not mean, not wordy. Just a clean, polite rejection that keeps things respectful without needing a big dramatic explanation. He kept his current shares because the math made sense and his portfolio moves were never driven by emotion. But he dropped one final thought at the bottom. He wrote that the question her kid might ask someday is the exact same one his daughter asked. Whether you taught her that a person's true worth is visible or invisible. That is the only choice that matters down the line. He sent it Tuesday morning. Before dropping Lily off, before their normal everyday life restarted. And washed away those brief moments where heavier, complicated thoughts had hovered. He drove his 7-year-old beater car, keeping the radio turned down quiet. She belted out some catchy tune she had picked up at school. Totally off-key, without a single care, he just drove. We both know respect is the one currency that never crashes. Not because it buys you things, but because it shows exactly how much you value the human being standing before you. Let's look at how we measure human worth, and how people behave when there isn't a healthy bank balance to impress them. When someone's shoes are scuffed and their shirt has lost its shape. and their current struggle is all that's visible to a room full of strangers, who instantly judge them based on empty pockets. Scarlett Vaughn completely shifted her corporate leadership style in the following months. It wasn't sudden. She just started realizing which struggling employees she ignored during meetings and why. She stopped asking about status and dug deeper when meeting someone new. She stopped judging worth by appearance. Her direct reports always knew her to be sharp and highly effective. But they spotted a new empathy they couldn't quite label until one team member spoke up. Her youngest analyst captured it perfectly during a team debrief without even realizing how accurate she was. She actually listened before judging their situation. Nobody knew what sparked this compassion. Scarlett kept that secret to herself. We all know some personal lessons just do not belong in a corporate staff meeting. You carry the heavy lessons quietly, especially when learning not to judge cost you something real. Seeing past the struggle was always simple. A person is more than their situation.